You're listening to the RetireCoast Podcast, where money, business, and lifestyle come together. Join us each week as we explore smarter financial planning, starting and growing businesses, and building the life you want at every stage, from millennials and Gen X to today's retirees. And now, here's your host, serial entrepreneur, author, and financial guide, Bill Anderson.
Well, thank you for returning to RetireCoast Podcast. We're going to talk today about Old Fort Bayou. It's a fascinating bayou that's located in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, just inland of the Mississippi Sound and the Gulf of America. In fact, it runs about 12 miles, not long as far as rivers go, and which is what it starts out as. A creek in Springs flows into a tidal estuary, basically, but it looks like a river if you were on it, and it goes all the way out to the bay. It has a tremendous amount of wildlife, fish, plants. It's a nursery for lots of the environment here. It helps to sustain the fishing industry along the Mississippi Gulf Coast because it's a gigantic nursery for small fish, and they can live there without any predators, and then they'll eventually swim out where we are the biggest predator, probably. And people boat on it. They jet ski on it. It's a terrific place to visit, both from the nature point of view. You can kayak down some of the small sideways, or just kayak its entire length, or you can take a jet ski and go down it. A lot of people go to the very beginning, which is near Interstate 10, and the Shed is a great restaurant. It has been on television and have terrific food there. So many people go up there and eat and then go back down toward the bay and then out into the Sound and go back to Gulfport or Biloxi or wherever they came from. So we're going to have a dialogue here. We're going to talk a lot about it, and one of the many reasons why you should visit, whether you're fishing, you're a nature person, you like to boat, it's all there for you, and it's just off the coast. It's very close to Ocean Springs. So please listen and enjoy. This is part of our series on the Mississippi Gulf Coast that also includes a series on the barrier islands, all of them. Please listen to that as well. And go to RetireCoast.com, where you'll find tremendous amount of materials, articles all about this area if you're interested in the Gulf Coast, what it's like to live here as well. Thank you.
Imagine you are floating down a completely silent, winding waterway.
Just totally detached from the modern world.
Exactly. The banks are thick with ancient pine forests, the water is this deep, muddy green, and you are literally sharing the channel with American alligators slipping quietly beneath the surface.
Which is an incredible image.
It really is. But then, you look up and you realize you are floating directly underneath Interstate 10.
Oh, right.
With thousands of cars just doing 70 miles an hour right over your head.
Yeah, that image really captures the fundamental contradiction of the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Right.
You have centuries of raw, untouched ecology operating in the literal shadow of massive modern development.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring that exact contradiction by looking at Old Fort Bayou.
It's such a fascinating spot.
It really is. Because when you think of the Mississippi coast, you usually picture the blindingly white sand beaches, the flashing casino lights, and, heavy tourism infrastructure.
Yeah, all the engineered, man-made stuff.
But just a few miles inland sits this completely hidden 10-mile tidal estuary.
Hidden in plain sight, basically.
Totally. So our source material today is this comprehensive waterfront, boating, and wildlife guide written by Bill Anderson.
He's a resident there, right?
Yeah, he retired to the area, and now he explores and documents this whole ecosystem for RetireCoast.
Awesome.
And our mission for this deep dive is to understand how this single stretch of water sustains a wildly diverse biological engine, carries 3,000 years of human history, and maintains a completely different pace of life.
All just beyond the neon lights.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to understand how the bayou functions today, we really have to start with its basic geography.
Right, because that dictates everything else.
Exactly. The layout dictates everything we're going to discuss. So Old Fort Bayou originates up in the longleaf pine forests near a town called Van Cleve.
Okay, so it starts inland.
Yeah, inland. And from there, it snakes its way south and west through this very tight, twisting channel of wetlands and coastal marshes.
which eventually empties out into Biloxi Bay.
Right. And subsequently straight into the Gulf of Mexico.
See, the critical term you use there is estuary.
Yeah, it's not just a river.
No, it's not just a river flowing into an ocean. An estuary is this huge hydrodynamic mixing zone.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, you have fresh water flowing downstream from the inland pine forests, driven by rainfall and gravity.
Right, pushing down.
But at the exact same time, you have the immense power of the Gulf of Mexico's tides physically pushing heavy salt water upstream against that current.
So it creates this constant lunar-driven tug of war.
Like it's breathing, inhaling the salt water from the Gulf, exhaling the fresh water from inland rains.
That is exactly it. And because salt water is denser than fresh water, it often creeps up the bottom of the channel in a saltwater wedge.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, while the lighter fresh water flows over the top. The result of this whole collision is brackish water.
Right, that mix of salt and fresh.
Exactly. And the salinity levels in this brackish zone, they are never static.
Because it depends on the weather, right?
Totally. They fluctuate based on how much it rained inland yesterday or, how strong the incoming tide is today from the Gulf.
Which is crazy to think about. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by concrete and city noise, it's just amazing to realize this massive, dynamic, natural escape is operating silently right next door to major coastal development.
Yeah, it's doing all this heavy lifting right in the background.
And that ever-changing salinity gradient is basically the biological engine of the entire region.
It creates an environment where highly specialized plant and animal life can just thrive.
In conditions that would kill purely freshwater or purely saltwater species.
Exactly. But long before we understood the complex biology of brackish water, humans recognized the sheer abundance of resources it produced.
We just knew there was food there.
Exactly. I mean, the archaeological record along the bayou is staggering.
Staggering how?
Well, Native American groups, primarily the Biloxi and Pascagoula peoples, they utilized this exact waterway for at least 3,000 years.
3,000 years. Wow.
Yeah, they navigated these shallow, twisting bends in dugout canoes.
Because the bayou provided a limitless supply of fish, oysters, and clams.
And we know this with absolute certainty because they left behind massive shell middens along the banks.
Right. And for anyone unfamiliar with the term, a shell midden is essentially an ancient refuse heap.
Just a giant pile of shells.
Exactly. Over generations, communities would discard their oyster and clam shells in the same locations, eventually creating these towering mounds.
And today, those middens act as perfect archaeological time capsules.
Because of the calcium, right?
Yes, the calcium carbonate in the shells neutralizes the acidic soil, so it preserves animal bones, pottery fragments, and tools that would have otherwise just rotted away.
Oh, that's fascinating. So they give us a high-definition picture of exactly what these populations ate and how they live.
They really do. And following that Native American history, European colonizers recognized the exact same strategic value in the waterway.
Right, the French.
Yeah. In 1699, the French explorer Pierre Le Moyne d'Iberville arrived in the area.
And the French quickly established Fort Maurepas nearby, right?
Exactly. Which is actually heavily suspected to be the origin of the name Old Fort Bayou.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because it offered this protected inland harbor with immediate access to fresh timber and drinking water.
And the waterway's strategic importance only escalated from there.
Oh, absolutely.
The source text notes that during the Civil War, Union naval vessels, specifically these shallow draft boats connected to the USS Vincennes, would deliberately sneak into these narrow, winding channels.
Right, looking for Confederate supplies.
Exactly. They were hunting for Confederate supply lines that were using the hidden bayou to move goods undetected.
And then, by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Old Fort Bayou transitioned into a major commercial highway.
Right, before modern road infrastructure existed.
Exactly. Timber companies and charcoal burners were using the waterway to transport raw materials out of the pine forests and down to the coast for shipping.
So it was a bustling industrial thoroughfare.
Oh, totally. The shoreline would have been lined with shallow draft barges, logging operations, and commercial fishing camps.
The natural environment was being heavily leveraged for human industry.
Which was the standard at the time, yeah.
Right. But I actually need to challenge the trajectory of that history.
How so?
Well, look at almost any other urban waterway in the country.
Like the Chicago River.
Yes, the Chicago River, the Cuyahoga in Ohio, or the Gowanus Canal. Once a waterway becomes a heavy industrial transportation route, it stays industrialized.
That is a very good point.
Right. The banks get paved with concrete, the channels get dredged, and factories go up. Wait, so it went from a busy industrial transportation route back to a quiet, protected nature preserve.
It did, yeah.
Usually, human development works in the exact opposite direction.
What's fascinating here is that it's a super rare reversal, and it comes entirely down to topography and mud.
Just the mud.
The mud and the shape of the bayou, yeah. It actively resisted heavy infrastructure.
Ah, I see.
The channels are incredibly narrow and winding, making it just impossible to navigate large, modern commercial vessels.
They just couldn't fit.
Exactly. And more importantly, the banks are composed of deep, unstable marsh mud.
So you can't build on it.
Right. Building massive concrete bulkheads or heavy factories on that kind of shifting, saturated soil was prohibitively expensive.
So when modern highways and rail lines were eventually built inland, it was just cheaper to abandon the bayou than to engineer it for modern industry.
Exactly. The waterway essentially saved itself by being too stubborn and difficult to pave.
Wow. And the very elements that made it difficult to industrialize, the dense mud and the sprawling wetlands, are exactly what make it a biological powerhouse today.
Oh, without a doubt.
The source guide places immense emphasis on the marsh grass. It is not just decorative greenery.
Not at all.
It is the structural foundation of the entire Gulf Coast ecosystem.
Yeah, visually, it just looks like endless fields of tall green cordgrass swing in the water.
Right, just pretty grass.
But biologically, it is performing complex engineering. The root systems of this grass are incredibly dense and tangled.
Like a net.
Exactly. So when the Gulf tides push water up into the marsh, the dense network of grass stems acts like a giant physical comb.
A comb? That's a great visual.
It slows the velocity of the water down so significantly that any dirt or suspended silt literally drops out of the water column and settles on the bottom.
Wait, so it is actively building its own shoreline?
Yes. By trapping that sediment, the grass prevents coastal erosion.
That's incredible. And while the stems are trapping dirt, the root systems are acting as a chemical sponge, filtering out excess nutrients and pollutants before they can reach the open ocean.
And beyond the water quality, the most vital function of that tangled root system is providing a massive protected nursery.
Right, a nursery for the wildlife.
Because the structure of the grass creates thousands of tiny sheltered pockets where the water is calm and larger predators simply cannot fit.
So it's a safe zone.
Exactly. Millions of highly vulnerable organisms, juvenile brown shrimp, tiny blue crabs, and the fry of major game fish, they spend their earliest, most dangerous months hiding deep inside that marsh grass.
Because without the protection of those stems, they would be immediately consumed in the open water.
They wouldn't stand a chance. And the implications of that nursery extend far beyond the 10 miles of Old Fort Bayou.
Because they eventually leave the bayou.
Right. The adult fish and shrimp that are eventually harvested out in the larger Mississippi Sound and the open Gulf of Mexico, they began their lives hiding in these specific inland marshes.
So this single quiet bayou is a critical support column for the multi-million-dollar commercial seafood industry of the entire region.
Oh, absolutely. If you lose the inland marsh grass, the offshore fisheries collapse.
And the sheer volume of bait fish and shrimp cycling in and out of the marsh creates a completely unique dynamic for recreational fishing.
It really does.
Because we have that ever-changing brackish water, the fishing profile is completely wild. The salinity gradient means you can be fishing the upper, fresher reaches of the bayou and catch a largemouth bass.
A purely freshwater fish?
Right. Then, on the exact same day, you can navigate a few miles downstream toward the mouth and catch saltwater species like redfish, speckled trout, and flounder.
Finding freshwater and saltwater apex predators sharing the same interconnected waterway is exceptionally rare.
It has to be.
It requires a perfectly balanced transitional environment.
It's like a giant 24/7 seafood buffet.
That's pretty much exactly what it is.
And local anglers understand that the tide is the invisible hand controlling this whole ecosystem. The tides act as a natural conveyor belt.
Right, pushing the food in and out.
Exactly. When the tide rolls in, the water level rises, and the conveyor belt carries the bait fish deep into the flooded grass.
Where they hide.
Yep. And when the tide rolls out, the water recedes, pulling all that bait out of the safety of the grass and dumping it into the main channels where the larger predator fish are waiting to ambush them.
It's just a feeding frenzy.
Totally. That mechanism is why seasoned fishermen on the bayou completely ignore the clock on the wall. They plan their trips entirely around the moving tides.
Because a moving tide means the conveyor belt is running.
Exactly. And because this buffet is so incredibly rich, It attracts a cast of wild characters you wouldn't normally expect to find in the same body of water.
The wildlife diversity is staggering. I mean, the immense concentration of food generated by that tidal movement naturally attracts larger predators.
Like the alligators.
Right? The bayou is heavily populated by American alligators patrolling the slower backwater sections.
And birds, too.
Yeah, the tree canopy is filled with bald eagles and ospreys diving for fish, while the shorelines are stocked by great blue herons and snowy egrets.
Which, I mean, that is a robust lineup of native predators.
Very robust.
But Bill Anderson's guide highlights encounters that feel like a geographical glitch.
The dolphins.
Yes. Boaters frequently observe bottlenose dolphins traveling several miles inland, navigating the tight, muddy twists of the bayou to hunt schools of mullet.
Which is wild to see.
And there are also documented instances of bull sharks pushing into these brackish waters. Okay, dolphins and alligators swimming in the same waterway. How does a dolphin end up miles inland in a bayou?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it breaks our human habit of compartmentalizing nature.
What do you mean?
Well, we tend to draw a line on a map and say, here's the ocean and here's the inland river.
Right. We like neat borders.
Exactly. But marine life does not recognize those boundaries. Seeing a dolphin miles inland perfectly illustrates that Old Fort Bayou isn't just an isolated inland stream.
It's connected.
It is a continuous, living extension of the open Gulf of Mexico. The predators simply follow the food source wherever the salinity allows.
It really serves as a necessary reminder that you are entering a raw, unscripted environment.
You are definitely not at a zoo.
No, this is not a managed park where the wildlife is curated for human viewing. You are the guest in their habitat, in an active food chain.
And the guide is very clear about the rules of engagement there.
Right. You do not feed the alligators. You give the dolphins a wide berth, and you minimize your boat wake to avoid eroding those vital marsh banks.
Exactly. And, with all these wild locals and pristine habitats, to truly comprehend the scale and the shifting geography of this ecosystem, observing it from the shoreline is just insufficient.
You have to get out there.
You have to get on the water yourself.
Right. And the deep dive outlines this specific route known as the Old Fort Bayou Blue Way, which offers a really comprehensive cross-section of the environment.
The Blue Way is essentially the ultimate bayou boat trip.
It sounds amazing. It is a 20-mile round trip that begins out in the wide, open, salty waters of Biloxi Bay.
Where it's still very developed.
Right. Initially, you are cruising past large, manicured waterfront homes. But as you pass under the Washington Avenue drawbridge and head upstream, the human footprint just begins to vanish.
The transition is stark. I mean, the manicured lawns give way to expansive, unbroken horizons of marsh grass.
And the channel begins to narrow significantly.
Yeah. And as you continue pushing inland, the topography shifts again. The flat marsh transitions into elevated banks lined with dense pine forests.
And those ancient live oaks draped in Spanish moss.
Yeah, the canopy just starts to close in over the water.
And just as you feel completely immersed in this ancient, quiet wilderness, you hit that surreal juxtaposition we talked about at the very beginning.
With Waterway.
Yes. You navigate directly underneath the massive concrete pillars of Interstate 10 with the roar of modern traffic echoing down into the bayou.
It's such a wild contrast. You're floating beneath thousands of rushing cars on a waterway that looks almost identical to how it did when Native Americans paddled it 3,000 years ago.
It's like time travel. And then eventually you can tie your boat up at a local spot called the Shed Barbican Blues Joint.
Oh, yeah.
You literally transition from watching alligators hunt in the mud to eating ribs and drinking sweet tea in a matter of minutes.
The accessibility of the bayou is really one of its most compelling features. You don't need an expedition team to see this, just a boat and an appetite.
Exactly. You are exploring a rugged 3,000-year-old waterway in a small skiff on a Tuesday afternoon.
However, that accessibility can create a false sense of security regarding logistics.
Oh, absolutely. The guide issues a very crucial warning for anyone attempting the full 20-mile run. There are absolutely zero marine fuel docks anywhere upstream.
None. You have to fill up before you leave.
Once you leave the Biloxi Bay area, the commercial infrastructure just disappears.
And that lack of fuel docks is a direct result of the geography we discussed earlier.
Because it resisted development.
Exactly. Because the bayou resisted heavy commercial development, there was never a financial incentive to build fueling infrastructure in the upper reaches.
So you were navigating a fuel desert.
Yeah. If you fail to check your gauges and run out of gas in the upper bayou, you are entirely reliant on the goodwill of a passing boater to tow you out.
Good to know. But this perfect, intoxicating blend of extreme natural beauty and modern convenience drives a lot of visitors to want to do more than just take a day trip.
They want to stay.
Exactly. Bill Anderson's own narrative in the source text details his decision to retire from Southern California, move across the country, and buy property directly on Old Fort Bayou.
And the appeal is completely obvious. Waterfront living here offers a highly specific daily rhythm.
Right. Residents have private docks in their backyards. They observe ospreys catching fish from their porches and listen to the peace and quiet of frogs and insects every evening.
While still being just a 10-minute drive from the hospitals, restaurants, and casinos of downtown Ocean Springs.
So what does this all mean? Our traditional concept of waterfront property usually involves a sterile, heavily engineered environment.
Like a concrete seawall holding back the ocean.
Right? With a perfectly green, fertilized, manicured lawn running right up to the edge. But living on Old Fort Bayou requires abandoning that concept completely.
You can't live like that there.
No. You are not living next to a static body of water. It's about living directly inside a working, breathing ecosystem.
And this raises an important question about stewardship. Choosing to integrate into a working ecosystem shifts a resident's role from a mere homeowner to an active steward.
The environment dictates the terms of your living situation.
Totally. Homeowners are dealing with strict FEMA flood zone regulations because the water level fluctuates dramatically with Gulf storms.
Right.
And they face the constant reality of highly corrosive salt air degrading boat motors, air conditioning units, metal hardware.
But beyond the maintenance challenges, the guide points out that the most critical responsibility is managing the shoreline itself.
Yeah, this is huge because the instinct for many new waterfront owners is to clear-cut the native marsh grass to improve their view of the water, or to build a rigid wooden bulkhead to define their property line.
But the guide emphasizes that removing the marsh grass is basically catastrophic.
Oh, it's the worst thing you can do.
We established earlier that the complex root systems are the only thing holding the mud together and preventing erosion.
Right, so if you rip out the grass, you remove the structural integrity of your own property.
Which is crazy. When the next major storm surge pushes up the bayou, a rigid seawall will actually reflect the wave energy, scouring the bottom and accelerating the erosion.
Whereas the native grass, on the other hand, flexes and absorbs that wave energy, protecting the land behind it.
So if residents destroy the marsh to achieve a sterile aesthetic, they are systematically destroying the wildlife habitat they literally moved there to enjoy.
Exactly. The bayou requires adaptation from the people who live there, not the other way around.
Well, humans are not the only ones attempting to alter the landscape.
Oh, right. The nutria.
Yes. There is a bizarre detail from the source text to leave you pondering. The Waterway is currently dealing with an invasive species known as the nutria, or the koipu.
Which is this large semi-aquatic rodent.
Originally native to South America, right?
Yeah. They were introduced to the American South in the mid-20th century by humans attempting to establish a fur trade.
Of course we did.
Yeah. And when the fur market collapsed, the animals were released or escaped into the wild, where they just bred prolifically.
And they are easily identifiable by their large size and these prominent, bright orange front teeth.
They're hard to miss.
And they are an absolute nightmare for the bayou ecosystem because of their specific feeding mechanics. A nutria does not just graze on the green tops of the marsh grass.
No, they dig down.
They dig down into the mud and consume the rhizomes, the thick foundational root systems of the plant.
And by consuming the root systems, they are actively dismantling the biological engine we have been discussing this whole time.
Exactly. Once the roots are gone, the grass dies, the mud loses its structural integrity, and the shoreline simply dissolves into the water.
It turns productive nursery habitat into just barren open water.
So, the human response to this ecological crisis has been highly unorthodox. Recognizing that the nutria are destroying the foundational wetlands, the state of Louisiana has previously launched these aggressive culinary campaigns.
Trying to get people to eat them.
Yes, they actively encourage the public to hunt, trap, and eat the rodents. Chefs were enlisted to create nutria gumbo, nutria tacos, nutria sausage, attempting to convince the public that this giant orange-toothed river rat is a delicious, sustainable protein source.
Promising it probably tastes like chicken, right?
Basically, It is a fascinating example of humans attempting to engineer a cultural solution to a biological problem that we ourselves created.
But, while humans are busy writing recipes and trying to rebrand a giant rodent, the bayou itself is handling the situation with cold mechanical efficiency.
What do you mean?
Well, Bill Anderson notes in his guide that he frequently sits at local waterfront restaurants and just watches the Native American alligators actively hunting the invasive nutria right in the marsh.
Oh, wow. So the alligators are fixing it.
Yeah. The alligators have recognized a slow, abundant, and calorie-dense food source blundering into their territory, and they have adapted their hunting patterns to exploit it.
That is amazing.
It leaves you with a profound final consideration regarding our relationship with these environments.
Right. We spend so much time worrying about how our actions, whether it is introducing a foreign species for the fur trade or pouring thousands of tons of concrete for an interstate highway, are permanently scarring these ancient ecosystems.
And we should worry about those impacts. But the alligator hunting the nutria is a stark reminder of nature's relentless capacity for self-correction.
Because the ecosystem is not passive.
Exactly. When a new variable is introduced, the biological machinery shifts to incorporate it, consume it, or balance it out. The bayou has survived 3,000 years of dugout canoes, French forts, Civil War gunboats, and industrial logging.
It absorbed all that human ambition, buried it in the mud, and just kept growing marsh grass over the top of it.
Nature always finds a way to balance the scales, even if it takes a hungry alligator to do it.
It really leaves you wondering how many of our current modern interventions the bayou is just quietly tolerating, waiting to balance the scales on its own timeline. The next time you are standing on the Gulf Coast listening to the traffic and the casino bells, look inland. That silent ancient engine is out there, pulling the tides in, filtering the water, and letting the alligators handle the rest. Thanks for joining us. Keep exploring, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this presentation of Old Fort Bayou. We'll be publishing another one on Old Fort Bayou that is based on what it's like to live on Old Fort Bayou. It's going to add a lot more flavor. And these are based on articles that I've written and posted on RetireCoast.com. I strongly suggest that you go there and take a look at them because there's a lot of photographs, there's infographics, there's videos on there as well. So you get a much better feeling for Old Fort Bayou if you also check out our article on RetireCoast.com. Thank you for coming, and please return for our next podcast.